So, welcome to this episode of SEIYUU Lounge. This time around, I didn't prepare a script, so we're going to freestyle it. And what better theme to talk about than the best CDs that were released so far, or how good was the first quarter of 2023? And let's talk about my expectations versus what we got in this episode. So let's kick off this episode of SEIYUU Lounge. Welcome to SEIYUU Lounge. I am your host Vanessa, and today's topic is: how good was the music in the first quarter of 2023? So now, this is an episode that I do not have a script for. I decided that making a script for this would basically make this episode sound a bit too stiff in my opinion. So I'm going to freestyle it and talk a bit about the CDs that were released so far, or at least the CDs that impressed me the most in the first quarter of 2023. So, first off, in case you do not know what you are listening to right now, this is SEIYUU Lounge. This is a weekly podcast all about male seiyuu music and 2D groups. This is, of course, a feature that is complementary of the website, in which I have been for 12, almost 13 years, writing about all the music that impresses me in this environment or in this universe. You can support the work that I do by listening to this episode. You can also support the work that I do by liking this episode or by reviewing it on your podcast listening platform that you are using, regardless if it is Spotify or Apple Podcasts, for example. And you can also help by subscribing to the Hand That Feeds HQ's YouTube channel. If you want to go the extra mile, I also have a Patreon and a Ko-fi page set up, so you can actually be more involved in here and, in a way, help me continue to create more content about male seiyuu artists and 2D groups. With that part already behind our backs, let's start talking about the CDs, or at least what the first quarter offered us. This is where things get really frustrating for me, at least. If we compare with 2020, 2021, or even 2022, this year was the weakest we got. And when I say the weakest we got, I'm comparing it even with 2020, which was a really bad year because of the pandemic. And still, the quality of the music released in that first quarter was still better than the quality of this first quarter. So this already says something about the quality of the music that was released in the first quarter of 2023. So I was expecting this year to start with a bang, but seeing as how 2022 ended up with a weird streak of releases, let me tell you why a weird streak of releases. Usually in December, the last 2 weeks of that month do not have any music releases. And why is that? Because the Oricon charts close or stop counting sales during those weeks, or basically in those weeks. So usually artists or 2D groups never release the music in those last 2 weeks of the year, because the CDs would not rank at all. Same thing for seiyuu artists. But what happened in 2022 was that seiyuu artists and 2D groups actually were releasing music even in the last days of the year, which was ridiculous. And in some way I was already predicting that, well, they are now releasing all of this music right now with so much haste that maybe they are going to be radio silent in the first quarter of 2023. And yeah, I basically predicted that correctly. Besides some 2D music projects that always release music and do not seem to know when to stop, and stopping doesn't necessarily mean that I am fed up with the groups or the projects. It means that sometimes a 2D group needs to stop and regroup to create a new CD series and then bring everyone refreshed. Good examples of franchises that never stop and should stop sometimes are the Ensemble Stars and the Idolmaster Side M franchises. Those two franchises basically never stop releasing music. I do find these two projects, Ensemble Stars and the Idolmaster Side M, although the Idolmaster Side M has been a bit quieter in recent months. Especially Ensemble Stars is a bit too intense in the frequency with which they release music. Yes, I know they have more than 10 groups in the franchise and they need to release music for all groups within all the CD series, but still, they do back-to-back CD series, the groups never stop, the music is always being released. While this is exciting, it's not that welcoming for new fans, it can get really messy with time. When I am analyzing the music that is released, I tend to put aside any franchises that are constantly releasing music because they are almost like ever present. So I do know that they are going to be there, you all know that they are going to be there, and for sure a group within that specific franchise is going to release a CD. So it's a given. What I'm talking about when I mention the quality of the music released in a specific quarter is the quality of the music of those CDs that were planned to be released in a specific date, and it's not from groups or to the franchises or in even solo artists that are releasing music all the time. In this case, I feel like the first quarter of 2023 was weak. January was basically uneventful, with only Shunichi Toki standing out a little bit in there, and even with that CD, I was not 100% convinced that the music was genuinely amazing. It was good, but it was not to the high quality level that Shunichi Toki has used everyone to. While there was something exciting being released in January, I still felt like January was so weak that I even had to postpone or really discard the episode about January in the monthly review series, because I had nothing to talk about in January. It was that uneventful. At the same time, there were changes and February was a bit more exciting. Still, not with as many music releases as you would have wished. We had, of course, the digital singles being released by some top SEIYUU artists, but digital singles usually aren't a good measure of the quality and usually will be part of a bigger release, so I tend to not review those if I know that for sure those digital singles will be part of a full-length album. So I'm looking forward to see if those digital singles actually make it to an album. So the biggest release in February was undoubtedly Kentito's Hanabi, and for me it's one of the best CDs released so far. Of course, there's not much to compare to, because the rest or the year up until then had been really poor. But still, I already added it to my list of favorite CDs of the year, and it is already in the contention for best EP or mini album or album of the year. I do feel like Kentito is growing a whole lot, and as I said before, I do enjoy his voice a whole lot. He has been showing that he's a really good singer. He already showed a couple of times before with Yuma, or even with the 2D groups he's a part of, especially Anthos, or even Sam. But there is something about him and his singing that was not clicking with me up until now, that somehow his solo career made me click with it. Perhaps it was because of the 2D groups he was a part of, in which he does have the spotlight, but it always seems like his performance is a bit subdued or subtle in comparison with all other singers that are performing alongside him. So, with the spotlight completely on him, I finally understand or fully grasped how technical he can be and what he has to offer. I do love that he isn't shying away from showing his singing skills and the passion that he has for city pop, funk and rock music. So he's showing all of that in his performances, and I do love that a whole lot. I do love as well the fact that he is performing city pop music. The other artist that also performs city pop music is Kotaro Nishiyama, and there aren't any other SEIYUU artists performing city pop music as their first and foremost or their flagship music genre. So it is good to see that this nostalgic music genre that basically comes from the 80s, late 80s, early 90s is coming back, and there are genuinely good singers among male SEIYUU embracing it and making it shine. So as a big fan of all things 80s, it is in a way nostalgic for me, and it puts a smile on my face when I hear a SEIYUU performing music in such a music genre, and especially doing a really nice job at that. Kentito impressed me a whole lot with Hanabi. It is a CD that is easily a contender for best CD of the year. Of course, we still have a lot of male SEIYUU yet to release a full-length album this year. There are many that may be releasing a full-length album this year, so that list may change drastically in the coming months. Then we have March, and finally a month that puts a big smile on my face. Finally a month with as much quality, variety and activity as January 2022 basically gave us, and it is a treat to go back and re-listen or revisit the CDs that were released in March, now that we are in April. Serenity basically arrived and shook everyone to their core with a CD or an EP yet again that is incredibly consistent, and that shows that the group is consistently growing, although they keep on saying that this is a hobby and we're not doing this 100% seriously, we are just having fun. If this is them just having fun, I cannot imagine them taking this completely seriously. So you already have a lot of quality in here. Yoshiki Nakajima and Yuichiro Mehara are in perfect harmony, which is amazing. Yuichiro Mehara has grown a whole lot as a singer. I did have my reservations, especially it's like this. If you have been following the reviews that are right on THTFHQ.com, especially those in which Yuichiro Mehara is a part of, basically Solids, for example, you will be aware that I was quite on the fence about his singing skills. Sometimes he sounds really amazing, other times he sounds like he doesn't know even how to sing. That is tricky, and a big reason why that happens is because, and there are SEIYUU that have said this before, is that to sing as a character, you do not need to sing well. You need to sing according to the instructions. So if the instructions say that you do not need to sing well or pay much attention to the way you are singing, that's what the listener will get in the end. So perhaps he was already a really good singer, but he was not showing that at all with Solids. Well, actually in the most recent CDs with Solids he was sounding really, really well, but some of the earlier stuff and even up until 2020 it was sounding a bit weird. Right now he's really shining and he's really sounding really well, so I'm quite excited to see and hear what he can do next. And being a big fan of good voices, being a good fan of growth in the singers that I appreciate or in the voices that I'm quite fond of is really exciting to see and hear. Overall, Servanity's Midnight Sun is quite an amazing mini album, and I do recommend you to check it. It is rock to the core, of course, but it is not as aggressive as previous things released by them. This time around you also have city pop, you also have funk, and you will have a unique composition going on in there in one of the songs. So it is well worth checking out. Then you have Yume's Atmosphere. Yume's Atmosphere is not necessarily an album that I would deem perfect or an album that I would say would be a contender for Best Album of 2023. Perhaps won't even feature in the final list that I will be creating in the end of the year. But it is a really cozy, feel-good album that is one of those that you should listen to if you want to feel loved, if you want to have a good time or just relax after work or after school. It is all about these relaxing, chill and cozy vibes, and there are times in which a CD like this feels really, really good to listen to. It's not a CD that is overly technical, it is not a CD that has outstanding performances that will make you talk about those for years, but it is a CD that feels right. and sometimes a CD that feels right is worth more than a CD that is extremely technical. This is a CD that feels right to listen to, and to me, it is one of the highlights so far in this year. And to wrap up this feature, because I do not want to make this really long, let's talk about Lolodi's arc. So, if you are not aware, Lolodi is a group part of the Hanadol franchise. They are a lyrical pop group, much in the style of Growth. However, if Growth basically took a wrong turn and entered a shop for emo kids. So they are really, really dark, they are really, really emotional, and most of the times their music is not that easy to listen to, which is something that explains why there are not that many fans among even in the international fandom of Lolodi. It is a pity because this group is so technical and so amazing on the vocal end, not to mention the compositions by Takeshi Hama that are ridiculously good, but the group is so good that they deserve your attention. So Lolodi released Arc, which is a really complex CD this time around. I believe it is going to be even more niche than any other CD the group has released so far. But it is so strange, yet so interesting that it makes you listen to it over and over again just to understand what is happening in there. Why the compositions are so different from usual, while the singing style is so weird to the point that there is no tension going on in one of the songs. Lolodi really went out of the box, and this is saying a lot because this group is always out of the box. They went out of the box for Arc, and what we got in here is a CD that is going to shake you to your core. It's also a CD that you would not want to listen to all the time because it is too depressive. I speak for myself when I say that this type of music for me doesn't affect me psychologically. So I can listen to emo music or depressing music all the time and I do not get depressed. But if you are the type of person that easily or that is easily influenced by this type of music, or that you feel that your psyche is not that well and you feel a bit fragile, I do not recommend you to listen to Lolodi anytime soon. But still, if you do have a good place to listen and you feel like you can listen to the CD, I welcome you to listen to it, because it is an outstanding set of performances and the journey you go through in those is quite remarkable. You will not feel or go through something like this with any other 2D group, not even the top ones. You will not feel anything like this in any other group. I do recommend you to check Lolodi's Arc. So with this, I'm going to wrap up this section and let's go to the outro. The first quarter of 2023 was not impressive at all, and I was quite frustrated to find that many 2D music projects were not active at all, like Dig Rock, Dear Vocalist, even Visual Prison were not active at all, and that on the other hand there were 2D music projects that, instead of taking a little break to regroup and to improve the quality of their music, or maybe finding a way to add more fans or making themselves more accessible to new fans, they were still active all the time, basically being an overwhelming presence, regardless if you like it or not. At the same time, 2D groups were not focused on releasing much music in the first quarter, and those that were quiet were regrouping, those that were active were continuing to basically series that were kicked off in the previous year. Now, when it comes to solo artists or bands, things were a bit different. Right now, because the year had been quite uneventful, it was the best time for SEIYUU artists and bands to release music, because there is no competition. Imagine last year, February 2022 was ridiculous. There was no way all those SEIYUU and bands could rank at the same time on Oricon's top 10 or even top 20. You had Yuma Uchida, Toshiki Masuda, Makoto Furukawa, Soma Saito, Axia, all releasing music at the same time, and not all of them ranked in the top 10 because they couldn't. They had to compete against themselves and also against J-pop artists and K-pop acts. It was quite impossible for them to all manage to get a spot in the top 10. Given that the beginning of 2023 was going to be that uneventful, it actually was strange how there were some SEIYUU artists that usually don't sell well that didn't make the best out of this opportunity to shine when there isn't any competition. This was a golden opportunity for many SEIYUU artists that have a smaller following to actually be out there and make themselves known instead of releasing music at the same time of the big artists in the SEIYUU industry. You are not going, as a small or as a SEIYUU with a small fan base, you are not going to release music at the same time as Mamoru Miyano, Shota Aoi, Yuma Uchida, Soma Saito or Toshiki Masuda. You are crazy if you do that. Because they are really going to, especially Toshiki Masuda, Mamoru Miyano and Soma Saito, they are going for sure to be on top 10, they are going for sure to be selling a lot, and they are going for sure to eclipse your CD release, because they are going to do something that is not usual. Or that is usual, but they have a really big fan base, and that fan base basically makes up for the fact that their music may not be that innovative. This was a golden opportunity for SEIYUU artists, male SEIYUU artists, to actually release music when there was no competition in there. Alas, they didn't do anything of the sort, so the first 3 months of the year were weak as hell. Highlights, of course, Kentito, Servanity, Lolodi and You Make. Out of these highlights, only Kentito, Servanity and Lolodi may be in the end year list features, so let's see how the rest of the year continues and what kind of music we are going to get. Perhaps the rest of the year may be awful, or perhaps the pace is going to pick up and we may be getting a lot of really awesome music around summer, and the biggest artists may be making their comebacks in autumn, which is quite exciting. I believe this is all about the CDs or how the first quarter of 2023 ended up being. I'm going to make these a regular feature, so I will be releasing quarterly episodes that dive into the music that has been released so far, and to give you a brief overview about what was released, the quality of the music that was released, and what was expected and what didn't manage to happen. I hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to the next ones. And now it's time to make you the question of the episode. So now tell me, what do you think of the music that was released in the first 3 months of 2023? And are you excited for what male SEIYUU artists and 2D groups may release in the second quarter? So let me know in the comments on YouTube, and remember, leave your comments as complex or as simple as they may be, and you can be featured on upcoming episodes of SEIYUU Lounge. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss the hand that feeds HQ's weekly male SEIYUU and music related content, hit the subscribe button. I'll return next week with another episode of SEIYUU Lounge, and that is going to be part 2 of the male SEIYUU that could impress as a cappella singers feature. Thank you for listening and see you guys around.